I was proud of how smart Selena was, of how she brought books on the bus and earned her high school equivalency diploma, and then went on to master Spanish. I admire how much energy she put into telling kids to stay in school and stay off drugs whenever she was asked to speak at a school. She wasn't just talking the talk, she lived according to the philosophy she preached. She had a special soft spot for fans who faced more obstacles than most. Dictator and members of the road crew would go out in the crowd and spot them, then come backstage or onto the bus and tell her all about the attendants members who had struggled to come and see her. And without fail, Selena made time for them. Selena, Dictator might call, coming backstage. There's a little girl out here in a wheelchair who really wants to meet you. Selena was drop everything to go meet those fans and have her picture taken with them, hugging them and giving them her full weighted smile. She was fun too, always dreaming of pranks. Once we had a well muscled security guard named Dave who made the mistake of accepting one of Selena's challenges. I want to check out your reflexes and reaction times, she told him. You've got to follow me and do everything I do. Selena held a Coke can in one hand. Now she handed him a can of Coke too. Okay, Dave, she said, just copy me. Let's see how fast you really are. Selena started doing things with her Coke can, tapping it on the top, putting it against her face, and stroking the can with one finger. Her motions were faster and faster as Dave followed her every move, trying to mimic her exactly. What Dave didn't know, however, was that Selena had lined the bottom of his Coke can heavily with red lipstick, so that every time he touched his face with the bottom of the can, he marked his face. Finally, we all just started laughing because we couldn't contain ourselves anymore. And Selena laughed louder than anybody else. On stage, of course, everyone saw a confident Selena, someone who could get the crowd eating out of the palm of her hand in minutes. She had that kind of comfort level in public. What nobody ever saw except those of us on the bus were her pensive moods, times when she might seem really subdued as she sat looking out the window, thinking hard about whatever was on her mind, or frowning over a new fashion design as she worked it out on paper. I was amazed by Selena's fashion sense, and I loved looking at the sketches that she was always doing on the bus. She frequently fantasized about one day opening a clothing boutique of her own. She would always sketch her designs and then add her signature like a fancy designer's logo. She was already starting to make her own accessories like jeweled belt buckles as well as designing costumes for the band. Selena would draw the designs and choose the fabric, then send everything off to a seamstress who had all of the measurements on hand. Unfortunately, we didn't have much say in what we wore, and most of the outfits didn't appeal to me. Selena's tastes were flamboyant, to say the least. She liked to see a lot of glitter and shine. I'd be handed a pair of black and white cowhide pants or a shiny purple satin suit with gold seam sewn down the front of the legs, and I say, oh man, do I really have to wear this? I remember an especially trying phase when Selena was all about crazy jackets that were cut short and squared with enormous shoulder pads. One specific, particularly audience version was black on the left side and white on the right side. Meanwhile, I was listening to Nirvana, and that band was wearing torn jeans and sneakers, pretty much my everyday look. Still, I love it that Selena would create something seemingly out of the thin air, visualizing ideas in her mind and then making them real through her voice and her hands. That's the thing about Selena. She amazed me more and more every day, and we spent together. This girl was getting under my skin in ways no other woman had ever had. It was now to the point where I could barely sniffle my feelings for her even when Dictator was around. I knew that I was in trouble even before our troubles really began. There was a kind of ritual when the band was touring on the Big Bertha. If we were far from our destination, we would all hang out in our bunks or play video games in the back lounge. The closer we got to our stop for the night, the more we hung out in the front of the bus, looking out the windows and joking around as we eagerly anticipated being able to stretch our legs and maybe even explore a new city. On this one particular night, everyone except Selena and I got onto the front of the bus. She and I lingered in the bunk area, standing just a few feet apart from each other. Even with the door closed, we could hear Pete clowning around to make everyone laugh. I think that Selena and I both realized at the same time that we were alone for once. I wanted to kiss her, but I was afraid that Selena might turn me down. The strength of my feelings for her, along with this awkward situation, made me more reserved than I would have been with another woman in any place. Nonetheless, bit by bit, we began drawing closer together as we talked. Well, to be honest, I was nervously backing up as she gradually came towards me. Selena had her back to the door leading to the front lounge area. I kept taking little steps away from her. I was breathing harder now, my face flushed and hot as I wondered, is this really going to happen? I couldn't deny my desire any longer. I was too overcome by Selena's presence, as if she were a magnet and I were merely a sliver of steel. She held me in place with her body. Those eyes on mine, I stopped moving backwards and leaned on the closet door with my left shoulder. Selena took another step towards me. There was nothing else that either of us could do at that moment but kiss. And what a kiss it was. I had never kissed a woman with so much depth of feeling. There was no stopping me or this. We kissed for several minutes, our bodies pressed close together, despite this little voice in my head saying, "You're dead. Dictator is going to kill you." All of a sudden, the door to the bunk area flew open behind Selena, let all the noise and laughter from the front lounge spill in. Selena's face paled as we quickly broke apart. She was too frightened to turn around. Had her father seen us? In a split second, though, I knew it was cool. The intruder wasn't Dictator, but Rick, our keyboardist, and the guy I usually room with on the road. "What's up, Rick?" I asked, partly to let Selena know that it was okay and partly to downplay for Rick what he had obviously seen. I felt bad for him. He was a nice guy and freaking out, no doubt, about having seen us together, knowing how Dictator would react if he knew. On the other hand, if I had to pick someone on that bus to walk in on Selena and me kissing, I would have picked Rick. He was the least of our worries. When we got on to the hotel, Rick and I got our luggage and room keys, then walked to the corner store because it was still fairly early. Pete and Joe were rooming together as they usually did, and Selena was staying in the room with her parents and Susie Q. I had just turned 21 a few weeks before, so it was still novelty for me to buy alcohol. Rick and I went to the store and bought beer to bring back to the room. Finally, safely behind the closed hotel room door, I opened a beer and tried to talk about what happened. I decided to ask Rick straight up if he was upset with us. "No need to worry about me," he said with a little chuckle. "You need to be careful that Dictator doesn't find out." For a chilly moment, I thought about what might have happened if Dictator instead of Rick had walked in on Selena and me. Dictator was very possessive, protective of Selena. Besides the obvious objections he might have to her seeing me because I was in the band and I wasn't good enough for his daughter, he was also worried about her getting hurt. Dictator have seen me with other women, and he thought of Selena as young and naive. It was easy for me to imagine how he might use the threat that I wouldn't be faithful to her as an ammunition. Also, being old school, Dictator was the kind of marriage where his word was law, and Marcella and his children obeyed that law. He might also fear that whomever Selena married might then dictate what she did, and including leave her music career to start a family, because that obviously would deflate money out of his pocket. In reality, I was the farthest you could get from being that kind of guy. I was ready to support Selena in whatever she wanted to do, but he didn't know that. Of course, I'm going to be careful, I told Rick now, but I can't believe what's happening. Rick gave that little chuckle again and could see that he, like Dictator, was thinking that I was playing Selena and trying to get something out of it, to use her in some way. But it wasn't like that, and I told him so. This is different, I told him. I really have feelings for Selena. Shut up, dude, he said at once. Leave me out of this. The less I know, the better. I couldn't stop talking, though. I was nervous, and this was the first time that I had ever talked about Selena with anybody. I kept trying to make Rick understand how serious it was, while at the same time asking questions about what might happen if Dictator found out about us. I don't know, Rick keeps saying. I don't know, Chris. Man, I said finally, I don't know either. Maybe I need to end this before it gets crazy. Maybe it needs to stop. Rick just laughed. Shut up, dude, he told me for the 100th time. You know you're not going to stop anything. And I thought, you know what? He's right. I'm not going to stop anything. At least Rick hadn't put me down or told me to stop seeing Selena. That was almost the same time as giving us his approval. The hotel phone jangled on the table next to Rick's bed, startling us both. He and I stared at the phone, feeling guilty for even having the conversation. Then Rick slowly picked up the receiver and said hello. His face broke into a grin, and then he started laughing. Yeah, shut up, dude. He's right here. It was Selena. Rick always called her dude. Did you and Rick talk? Is he okay? She asked anxiously. Rick was sitting there on the bed looking at me and shaking his head. Yeah, we were just talking about everything. I said, everything is cool. I'm probably freaking out more than Rick is, she said with a little moan. I can't believe how close that was. Anyway, I was just wanted to call you real quick to see if you're okay. I'm fine, I said. I'll see you tomorrow. She laughed. Not if I see you first, she said and hung up. Well, I said, still looking at Rick. I guess it's on. Our feelings for each other began to streamroll. Our common sense that Selena and I continued touring with the band over the next few months. Any chance we got, we sneaked off to be alone together. Selena had no problem saying to her father, Chris is going to the store with me for a few minutes, or Chris and I are going to get something to eat. We'll be right back. Dictator would say, okay, you all come right back, and off we go. The minute that Selena and I were all out of sight, we would act like any normal couple, holding hands or walking with our arms around each other, or even chancing a breathless kiss during our precious moments of alone time, away from Dictator's watchful gaze. We were always on the down low around her parents, but as the weeks turned into months, we gradually stopped caring about who else in the band knew about us. Everyone in the band had personal lives and secrets. We all had to figure ways around Dictator, who was a conservative man, a devout Jehovah's Witness, and a traditional father, and a greedy, money-hungry person. We all knew how to keep secrets from him, because nobody wanted to unleash his temper. Besides, Dictator simply didn't see me as a candidate for Selena's affection. And Selena and I were so young that I'm sure most of the band members thought that our desire for each other would burn itself out and the relationship would end long before. Nobody realized the enduring bond we were forming as we fell in love, including Selena and me. Selena usually took the lead in demonstrating our affection openly. I was too nervous about her father finding out to take much initiative. In fact, she used to love teasing me, knowing how anxious I was. I'd be hanging out in the back of the bus with Joe or Pete or even ABCDFG, and she'd just come in and say, hey, what's going on here? And kiss me. That kind of display terrified Joe because he didn't want to upset Dictator, but it was usually ABCDFG who would say something. Selena, why do you have to do that in front of us? ABCDFG might ask, but Selena would crack up, like most pesky little sisters. Selena loved getting a rise out of her big brother. Between shows, Selena and I saw each other as much as possible. I learned more about her as time went on, yet the more time I spent with Selena, the more often she managed to surprise me. Once, for instance, we went horseback riding on the beach around the bay in Corpus, out near Mustang Island, with a few friends. The horses were calm as we rode away from the barn and we went at a nice little pace. It all felt very romantic as the horses cruised along the shoreline, while Selena and I chatted with our friends. On the way back, though, the horses went crazy. The animals knew when they hit the end of the trail and could turn around at the point. They practically wheeled in place to gallop back to the stables for feeding time or whatever. Our friends were shouting, "Oh shit," as the horses raced back to the barn, terrified out of their minds. I was scared too, but of course I was too cool to act scared in front of Selena. I was afraid that if I panicked, the horse might run even faster too. Meanwhile, Selena was galloping on her horse alongside mine, laughing her head off, not at all frightened. She looked as comfortable on that horse as she did on stage, and I didn't even know she could ride. Then again, Selena wasn't like most women I knew. Then I suggested fishing from the pier in Corpus where you could rent poles. She surprised me again by being all for it. I used to fish with my pops quite a bit. He had a little skiff and loved to tool around in it with my mom and me, so I was comfortable baiting live fish on the hooks. Selena was thrilled when I showed her that just by tossing a line with these small fish, you can catch a bigger fish. Fishing in Corpus was even better than when I used to fish in the freshwater around San Antonio. In freshwater, you can have the line in the water for half an hour without getting a bite. But in saltwater, you'll catch something every few minutes, whether it's a keeper or not. Selena surprised me again by wanting to do everything herself. The only time I stopped her was when she caught a hardhead, a fish that's kind of like a catfish and has bar-like whiskers that was really poked through your skin. Often, when I saw Selena, I would bring white roses, her favorite flowers, and we were always on the phone. We also wrote love letters and cards constantly. I still have boxes of cards. She saved every card I sent her. Selena wrote such sweet notes to me that it still hurts to read them, especially because she dated everyone and I can remember what we were doing on those dates. I love looking back to where we began, seeing us as we were at the beginning. She wrote once, then slowly leafing through the memories that we made together to bring us where we are today. Eventually, everyone in the band seemed to grow more comfortable with the idea of us as a couple. It got to the point where we might be standing backstage and she just come up and put her arms around me or give me a kiss in front of the whole road crew. I still hung back a little. I felt like I had to be careful, not just because of dictator, but because I didn't want to be thought of as possessive or insecure. Like any other relationship, ours went from one thing to the next and continued progressing. The only difference was the fast pace. Again, this was partly due to our circumstances. We weren't working 9 to 5 jobs and seeing each other only on dates. We were together in the studio, at ABCDFG's house, on the tour bus, and on stage. Inevitably, it was on the bus where we were finally intimate for the first time. Ooh. We were traveling from Corpus to Dallas at the time. When we arrived to our destination and everyone began unloading things from the bus, my legs were shaking. Once again, I didn't know how to act or what to say. I remember standing outside the bus talking to Pete and blurting out, "I think I'm really falling in love." With her because I was that desperate to talk about it. Pete was supportive. "Man, it's all good. Don't worry about it. I can see how she feels about you too. Everything's going to be okay." Just at that moment, I happened to look up at the bus and saw one of the blinds twitch in one side of the windows. My heart was pounding so hard that I could hear it in my ears above the Dallas street traffic. Maybe things were going to be okay and maybe not. That night was the first and only time I ever felt strange going on stage with Selena. My body was still buzzing and my mind was a jumble. Everything felt upside down. Selena and I knew each other better on stage than we did in that back room of the bus, pumping and sweating. On stage, we knew each other's moves, while our private physical connection off stage was still fresh and unexplored. We were both freaking out so much that we couldn't look at each other. Of course, each of us knew where the other one was because we had our set spaces, places, and routines. But we were trying so hard to act like nothing was going on between us that we literally didn't look at each other. I kept tuning my guitar and checking the amps when, of course, everything was fine. When the show began, Selena came on stage and kept her eyes focused on the crowd. I was right behind her on the same side as always, but instead of looking in my direction, Selena kept looking the opposite way. We were both flustered, and then we had to kick into gear. I started playing the guitar, and she started singing, and after a few minutes, things almost felt normal again. Almost, but not quite. We both knew that something big had just happened and that things were going to be different after the show. I went up to her and said, "That was weird, right?" "Yeah, that was weird." She agreed, and then she just started laughing. "Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad that what happened happened," I said. She grabbed my hand quickly and then let it go. So I knew that whatever happened from now on, we were in it together. I never imagined that Selena and I would declare our love for each other in the Pizza Hut, but that's exactly what happened. Whenever the band was on the road, we had a routine of meeting at the bus when it was checkout time at the hotel. The road crew was already be gone with the equipment, but we load our own bags onto Big Bertha and wait until everyone was there, then move on to our next destination. Selena was almost always the last to arrive, usually because she was making last minute clothing changes or doing her hair and makeup. It had gotten to the point where she never went out in public without looking her best. We never knew when reporters or fans or producers might be in a crowd or just waiting on the sidewalk. If they saw our bus pulled up, this particular morning, though, it wasn't Selena who was last to arrive. It was Dictator. The rest of us sat talking on the bus, and Selena kept saying how hungry she was. Her favorite food was pizza with extra pepperoni. I had noticed a Pizza Hut across the street but didn't say anything about it. I assumed that Dictator was just on the phone with a promoter or something. There was no telling when he might return. Selena, however, had spotted the Pizza Hut too. She was going to do what she wanted. She usually did. "Once to go get pizza, Chris?" she said. Everybody knew we had started a relationship by then, and they had our backs. The first thing Dictator would do when he returned to the bus was ask where we were, like a psychopath. But we knew they just say she went to Pizza Hut and Chris went with her. Dictator probably wouldn't think anything of it. In fact, he'd feel better because Selena had a chaperone that thought made me feel bad were again about all the sneaking around we were doing. I thought we ordered pizza to go, but Selena wanted to sit at the table. We sat near a window so that we could see the bus, and then she started talking, asking me about my feelings. "I'm really happy with you," said Selena. "I love spending time with you, but I need to know where you think our relationship is headed." I decided that I had to tell her right now how I really felt. This was terrifying prospect. I had girlfriends before. I had even said I loved them because I thought I knew that what love was. But I had never experienced the feelings I had for Selena, and I had told her. I just opened up and said how happy she made me feel. "I always look forward to seeing you and spending time with you," I said. "To be honest, I can't wait until we're going to be together again. When we're not on the road, I wish that I could speed up time so that I could be with you. And when we're together, I wish that I could slow that time down." I told her what I didn't feel right hiding our relationship from her father. It was gnawing away at me. I was tired of the secrecy, and I wake up sometimes in the morning feeling sick, like I'm doing something wrong and just haven't been caught yet. But today's the day. Selena nodded. She understood that. She said, but she still thought it was too soon to tell Dictator. "Let's wait for the right moment. I wonder if there ever be such a moment, but didn't tell her that. Don't get me wrong, I said. I'd never let my guilt about hiding this from your dad stop me from seeing you. It's just that if I could change one thing, it would be that. Your dad is a great guy, and I feel like I'm betraying him, but I will always want to be with you. I just stopped talking, then wondering suddenly what Selena thought about everything I just said. I was almost holding my breath. To my relief, Selena looked at me in the eyes and said, I love you. That was the thing about Selena. She was one of the bravest people I've ever known, not just on stage, but in relationships. She was really quick to put her feelings out there. You always knew where you stood with her. There was no manipulation, no lying, no games. Selena was purely herself and true to who she was and what she believed in. My heart was pounding so hard that I thought everything in that peaceful place could hear it. My pulse was racing and I just wanted to get up and shout, Did you hear what Selena just said? She loves me. I had never had been happier in my life than I was at that moment. Hearing that declaration of love from Selena, I grinned. I love you too, I said. It felt good to have taken that step and declared our feelings aloud to each other. Even as we watched out the window for a dictator, I reached across the table and took Selena's hand in mine. We just sat there for a while, touching and loving each other, secure in the knowledge that we would never let go. Selena wore the biggest smile as we walked back to the bus. I still smile when I remember how happy she looked that day. At that time, though, I had to scold her. Hey, stop smiling, I said. You're going to give us away. But it wasn't Selena who put our relationship in jeopardy. It was me. A few short months after Selena and I declared our love in the Pizza Hut, I sat in a San Antonio police station under arrest, wondering if I had destroyed the best thing in my life.